Hello and welcome to Africa's Critical Thinkers.
Episode 2 is entitled From Sweets to Tech.
My name is Kagiso Tlogbatla, aka African Investor, and I will be speaking to Africa's critical thinkers who I find inspiring and motivate me to find African solutions to African problems.
On this episode, Bongane talks about how he started his entrepreneurship journey by selling sweets to selling gadgets online and getting scammed.
Let's start the conversation.
So just to kick off, maybe you can start by, introducing yourself, telling me about your background, where you grew up, where you went to school, your family setup, were you firstborn, lastborn, middle child?
I'm the only born. Yeah, look, I'm Bongane Shabalala. I grew up in a small township called Mbalenhle. Mbalenhle Secunda, which is in Mpumalanga. It's where Cecil is, the other Cecil. So, went to school here, went to high school, went to township school until grade 4, and then went to town like grade 5, 7, and then semi-African school in high school. And in primary school, it's where I discovered my love for computers. And that bug bit me. And then already, I think from like grade 8, I'd learned how to basically assemble computers and stuff like that. Started fixing some for my friends, playing around OSs and, pulling it apart and putting it together. So high school was a natural thing to just choose IT to do. So I did a bit of programming. It was very hard, I barely made it with the programming part, but hardware was good enough, and I got a good mark at the end of matric. And I went off and I studied a BSc in the University of Free State in IT information systems. And basically, I come from a family of 5. I've got an older sister and a younger sister. So, yeah, that's me. My dad was an entrepreneur. He started with the taxi, and then he had 2 taxis, and then he left the taxi business, and then he started spaza shops. At one point, he was transporting school kids to school. At one point, he was selling chickens. And then he started 2 spaza shops, which were quite successful in the day. And then he went a bit into property as well. So
would you say probably your dad was your inspiration to go into entrepreneurship? You saw how he operated, and then you're like, let me also do this thing.
It's an odd question, because it's not something that you actively think about, and there isn't a point where you go back and think, I think that's what inspired me, because it just automatically happens, in grade, I think it was in grade 6, I started selling sweets, right, at school, but I take the sweets from my dad's shop. So I was getting them at cost.
Oh.
Yeah. No. They were not free. I was buying them. So there were these sweets. There were these imported sweets. Oh, they were so nice, man. So 100 in a pack. My dad was getting them for 5 rand because he was buying them in boxes, So I would get them for 5 rand, and I would go and sell them at school for 20 cents, right? So I was basically getting them at 5 cents each, right? Yeah. And basically I did that. I think that was in grade 6 and grade 7. And the business was good. I mean, it got to a point where some of my friends now, I'd give them like a packet or 2 in the morning to sell as well, and then they just have to give me 15 rand, and then they can keep the 5 rand, and that's like the first time I started having, HR issues, because some people were chowing stock and things like that. and I had to let some of them go, and stop selling. So yeah, but I mean, looking back, I mean, if that opportunity was not there, chances are I wouldn't have gotten to start selling sweets, So I went from that, selling sweets, to selling lollipops. Another friend of mine that we're in the same team with, we're in the hockey team, was my captain, actually. So I played hockey. I know I'm tall, but I played hockey, first team.
So I'm saying you're very tall for a hockey player.
I'm very tall for a hockey player, but the kind of school I went to, there was no basketball. So, hey, it was either rugby or that. So, yeah, so from that, he bought a phone for me on Bit of Buy. And I was like, hey, so, I gave him some money, buy me a phone for this much, and he got something. And from there, I learned about Bit of Buy. I'm like, listen, just show me how it works and how does it. Then I went on my own. And I started now selling stuff there on my own. I started buying like consoles, Xboxes, PSPs at the time, buying games, selling them on there, getting phones here and there, and selling them. And moved from that to computers, buying graphics cards, this and that. And I basically did that until varsity. Uh, so I guess you could say that's how everything really started, from sweets to selling gadgets online to getting scammed.
Lessons of getting scammed, I guess, are vital, right? They're important in anyone's journey of entrepreneurship because they kind of wake you up to say, look, this is not everyone is of the same mindset as you in this industry, so you must be careful. Rather get scammed
Yeah.
of 10 rand than get scammed of 10 million rand, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, you don't choose, because at the time you believe in it so much.
Yeah, but
You believe
maybe
everything is clear.
maybe if you can tell us what tell us more. Actually, tell us about your business, the business that you're currently running now, Mysurfer. Like, how did that start? How did the idea come about? Yeah, how did the idea actually really come about?
Okay, so with Mysurfer, I was basically staying in a commune, right? I mean, I'm an IT guy. I need to use the internet almost all the time. Back then, I was staying in a commune, and look, the owners at the time didn't really care much about internet. It was not, it's not what it is now, where it's like, you need it for your studies. Back then, you could come back to campus late because you were on the internet and, those kind of things. So, and I mean, I think it wasn't free, but it was very cheap on campus. So, and then some guys stayed further from campus than others. Um, and then I think I spent about 150. I think I was on Vodacom at the time, on 500 megs, I think. So there was a lot of money, back then.
Oh, it's still
So
today.
it's still it's still a lot of money, exactly. Well, we didn't use as much data as we do today. So yeah, so you can imagine, I'd used it now to go online, to go to my buy and other forums to sell stuff and whatnot. So that was money that I was using from the business, to basically fund this thing, or this data need. So, and then a friend of mine, well, before that happened, I got into a new commune and I spoke with the owner, and his dad was actually doing networking. So I'm like, listen, I want to install internet at the house. So I was wondering, if you could help me. And it was like, fine. All I'll do is I'll put up the networking in the house so that each room has a network point, and then you can do everything else. I'm like, okay, cool, that's fine. So I thought it's one of those promises that, landlords make to the tenants and things like that. But I think within a week, the dad was there installing everything in the house and stuff like that. I applied for the telecom line, put on an ADSL connection via MWeb at the time. I think they had 384 kilobytes per second, um, from I think it was about 300 or something like that. I forgot, but it was cheap. So then I was charging everyone in the house 150 to have uncapped access. And I think it's either I broke even, or it actually made me 150, but that was my contribution to the thing, right? So I bought the router and everything. And yeah, basically that's how everything started. A year later, I moved houses, and that basically fizzled out. Um, and then a friend of mine said, dude, we need to, you can actually make a business out of this because there are so many people who could use it. I was like, hey, I don't know. I got a job in Midrand as a programmer, and I started working. And he was like, dude, I think we should do this thing. And that's where everything kicked off. I took out a loan, personal loan. Oh my gosh, of 40 grand. And then, yeah, we started the business. First month, I think it was in June, the first month, 2013. And I think our costs were like maybe $4,000 a month or something like that. We made our revenue on that month was $800. Yeah, and the rest is history, you know. We broke even after like a year and a half though. That was tough.
If you could have done it differently from a start perspective, what would you have done differently? Because obviously when you talking about the personal loan, you're like, hey.
Oh my guy. I think for the purposes of learning, I think at the time that was the best thing to do. And looking back now, if I had taken any longer to save the money, the business probably would not have started, or would have started on a smaller scale of doing a house, because we decided to go and do an entire complex, right? Or well, half of it, that had like probably covering about 400, 500 students. So we just did the math and we're like, okay, if we can get like 30, 40% of them to use our service, and then, we did the math and the numbers are very pretty, but those numbers didn't happen up until probably 2 years, that we had hoped for in the first month. Yeah. So I think I don't think in terms of the money, I don't think we could have gotten a different. I could have gone to someone to give me the money. That doesn't have a 30% annual interest.
But you live and you learn, yeah? And from an extent, so obviously since then to now, the business has expanded quite a bit. You hired people, you are in different regions. When did you realize that you needed to expand, and also how quickly did your business expand? Was it like an overnight thing where you were like, hey, okay, I need to expand in order to, make more money, or I need to expand in order just to sustain or stay relevant or take over the market share?
Yeah. So because our business is capital intensive, right? We basically needed to get enough traction to see and have excess money and have some profits, and that took a while. I mean, it took over a year, like a year and a half to 2 years. And then we basically went into another commune where it's smaller, it's easier to manage. And then we saw that the uptake was actually quite good. And then we found a partner when I just saw that it was going to be impossible to grow the way we're growing. The way we're doing business currently is going to be impossible, right? So what we need to do is we need to use a different model. We probably need to bring a partner on board. So we got a broadband partner in Bloem. The company's name is iClicks. Funny story. We were outside the office with my partner, and I was telling him that this business is not going to work. It's just better to shut it down right now, because like it's not going to work. There's just too many moving parts, and there's too many unreliable things. At the time, we're just using Telkom for ADSL, and if there was a fault or the internet was down, man, it could take you a week to 2 weeks to get them to come on site, right? Yeah. So that's not workable. So then I brought up the idea of this company, and he was like, I went there and I saw the CEO, and it didn't pan out. So now here we are sitting outside the offices of this company, and the CEO came out like, oh yeah, that's the CEO, by the way. I'm like, let's follow him. I'm like, yeah, follow him. So he followed him, and then he flicked him, and as he's flashing at the back and everything, the guy stops. I go out of the car, I go and introduce myself, and I'm like, can we please have a meeting with you? Whenever you're free, this is what we want to talk about, this is what we do. It was like, okay, yeah, sure. Then he gave us a time and date.
You're talking.
Basically. Basically, yeah. So, and then we're supposed to have an hour meeting with him. Ended up being about, I think, 3 hours, 3.5 hours with him at the office. We basically did a joint venture agreement with them. And then we explained the kind of product we want to provide and things like that. And I think from there, that's basically where everything now started happening, because they absorbed sort of half because of the JV. They absorb half of the hardware costs and things like that. And yeah, and there was a good deal on the table at the time for what we wanted to do, and that enabled us to grow. So that our overheads were not that big, and our initial capital costs were not that big. And we went at that point from probably, I think, 10 properties. No, we're probably maybe around about 10 properties to, I think today we're looking at about 200 and something properties. So, but then that happened from 2015, 2014, early 2014 to now. So it's a long time. Yeah, it's a long time. And things are constantly changing. The needs are increasing. There are different costs and things like that. So it wasn't overnight. And it's definitely not where we thought we would be at this point in time as well. But because the business is quite capital intensive, so it makes it a bit harder to move as fast as you want to.
Yeah. So obviously, what I'm hearing you say is that your expansion really, going from 15 to 200 plus locations was also part of it. It was made possible because of the partnership that you had, right?
Yeah.
So if you potentially going to do it alone, or it's going to take you a little bit longer. So also what I'm hearing you saying is partnerships are very important. It's no use necessarily operating by yourself. It's better to partner with maybe someone bigger or someone that knows something that will benefit the greater business model. And from a partnership perspective, so if you could do a partnership differently, right? Because you find that there's a lot of people that start businesses and get partners, but a lot of the time, if you ask that person, why didn't your business do well? My partner was the problem. Are you in a place where, I'm not asking you to badmouth your partner.
Oh, I was ready.
Don't badmouth. But are you happy with the relationship? Is it a mutual relationship? You don't feel like you, for lack of a better word, you're being screwed out of money or of deals or whatever.
Yeah, look, it's a good partnership. It stems from a friendship, right? Before we started the business, we knew each other for 2 years. We met in a commune we used to live in. I won't say we never had any problems. We had issues, but we always have issues and then we resolved it, right? So I think the biggest thing is that you both need to be on the same page on what you want to do, what you want to achieve, what's the end goal, and just being transparent, right? And the other thing that I learned is, obviously it differs from case to case, but you also need to give the other person the benefit of the doubt, right? You need to, when in doubt, you need to trust that whatever it is that they did, however you think they did it because it was the best thing at the time to do for the business, right? For other partnerships, it's probably different, but what works for me is that whatever you're doing, whenever I look at the books and things like that, because my partner is the one who's basically running the show now most of the time. Actually, full time, he's the one who's running the show. So I need to trust that he's got the best interest for the business, whatever he's doing, right? And I mean, it shows in the numbers and how the business has grown and things like that. I'm not involved in the day-to-day runnings of the business and things like that. So I think trust is a very important thing. And once you lose that, the business will come apart, definitely. I'm not saying trust blindly as well, but I think it's based on a relationship. We've been in this for over 6 years now. So the fact that he's still there and is manning the fort and things like that says a lot about a person, I mean, he could have just gone on to go and get a job after he graduated and things like that. But he said, what, this is actually what I want to do. I want to make this my retirement, sort of a business, that kind of thing. So I think there are a lot of factors, but both people need to be level-headed, There are some partnerships where personality clashes, they don't understand each other. They come from, vastly different backgrounds. Someone is egotistic, and things like that. And it doesn't happen. But I think we're both level-headed. So, we're both very strongly opinionated. I can tell you that for sure. And we disagree, and we just leave it and we're like, okay, cool, next point. And then later, at a later stage, we'd come together and say, okay, cool, listen, we need to fix this. What are we going to do going forward?
So maybe to move out of the South African space a little bit and to look at the African continent and any opportunities that you've maybe found on the continent, or do you have aspirations of operating outside of South Africa? Because when you look at the internet and you look at connectivity, out of all the continents, the African continent is, one of the least connected continents in the world. Even though we, on average, I was reading a stat, it was actually late last year. On average, someone has got 2 cell phones or multiple SIM cards. So we are connected, but not necessarily connected to the internet. Is you've maybe thought about how do you take your skills and move? I know we've had this conversation, actually. We had it last year. That last about the potentials of operating in other countries. But have you maybe thought more about it, and do you have aspirations, or have you put a plan together on how you're going to do it and where the opportunities are?
Okay, so I remember we had the conversation, and it's a bit daunting, because you think we haven't conquered South Africa yet, so why would we want to go outside, sort of a thing, not even just South Africa, but our little market, niche market that we serve. So I went to Swaziland last year, and I got to see the situation in terms of data, the costs just to make a call and things like that. I was quite shocked, right? I don't remember the rates, but I just know that I was taken aback, right? For me, it was expensive.
Are they more expensive than South Africa?
Yes, without a doubt. Without a doubt. So, look, it's very expensive. I don't remember the price, but I just know that I wouldn't survive. I don't know how they do it there, but it is quite expensive. Or maybe it was a network that were on at the time. I'm not sure. But with that said, I think there's an opportunity, there for that. But it's obviously limited by the capacity on what we can do and how far we can go. What we've been looking also into doing is perhaps adding other value-added services, because competition is tight in the ICT space, in ISP actually. So we're looking at how can we add other value. So we've basically been trying to see how we can build a wholesome sort of a holistic solution, right? That's not just purely internet, because internet now is basically just like a road, right? So whoever's gonna have the cheapest one is basically going to win, right? If it's not fast enough, then you'll have to, get up and upgrade to the next package. But we'll get you in on the 299 or whatever the case is. And if you're not happy about that, then you can just pay us more premium, and that's where we'll make our money, sort of a thing, right? And that needs a lot of money to have to go and push out that marketing, infrastructure costs and things like that. And at this point in time, that's not something that we have. But so we're trying to basically build on, build the capacity, build the added value services, and maybe go and do some other platforms which are online based. So that, and we know the property space quite well in terms of students and things like that. So it's actually something that we've been also talking about, how we can get involved, because, we know the students very well. We know the owners and landlords very well. We know the agencies very well and how they operate. And there is an obvious gap that's there. But the question is, how do we do it in such a way that we don't lose our landlords, or we don't lose the agencies who give us business and things like that, So that's basically the space that we're trying to head into, instead of ramping up right now, because ramping up would need a bit of cash.
Yeah. So okay, maybe this answered a bit of my question now, because my next question was going to be, in order for you to get to the next level, like, what do you need? What do you need to get to the next level, and what is the next level for you as a company and as an entrepreneur?
So if I answer this question, I'd be basically going into the plans of what I want to do. which would then which would then give some other people some ideas on what to do. But yeah,
Yeah.
so but the plan is not to go after everybody. The plan is to stay niche.
Yeah.
The plan is to do another partnership that we're eyeing. Um, that will be able to basically give us a broader reach, because right now our current reach in Bloem, where we do the business, um, it's limited by our partner. Our partner is also trying to go out of Bloem. They've got some business in Porch and Pretoria as well. They've got a national license and things like that. So we're basically looking at how can we basically go and be everywhere where students are. Um, and that's basically the next move. And it might not necessarily be just internet or internet at all. In fact, it actually might be another student solution.
Yeah. But I mean, how do you, we currently now in obviously very tough times, uncharted waters for most of us. You know, we've never really lived through a pandemic like this one that's caused the economy to stand still. You know, education is changing in a way, not just education, actually, every industry has been impacted, and it's changing in a way that maybe not many people expected for it to, right? So education, for example, now typically students are actually studying from home rather than going to university. You know, obviously this also poses potential threats for your business and your business model. Is that something you've taken into consideration to say, look, if there's a major shift after this pandemic, you know, where it pushes people to now do study through UNISA correspondence, how does that look for your business? You know, are you not maybe potentially running a risk of a concentration risk, just having students as your client base as opposed to a broader target market?
Yeah, so that is a serious threat, and I think everyone has learned now that, you know, business as usual will no longer be business as usual, right? The ideas that you thought were crazy, that you couldn't. I mean, I'm studying as well. I'm doing my postgrad, and I would ordinarily have to.
Just overachiever. You just want to get all the qualifications.
Look, I want to do an MBA, okay? So I needed to do this. Even if I do it, you know, 2 years from now or whatever, but it's something that I wanted to do. So the thing is now, universities before would not entertain the thought of you not writing an exam for your course, right? And not being in a class and or in a test room, test center, you know, and then there are invigilators there, there's strict rules and things like that. And now they're like, okay, how are we going to deal with this? And they're like, okay, you know what, guys, for your exam, you won't have to write an exam. Like, maybe you'll do a little project sort of a thing, you know. And only to realize all of this could have been done without us ever having to be in a building. We could have had classes online, on Zoom or Skype or whatever platform we could have had them on. And we could have been tested online as well. You know, we could have done the group work and things like that. So it changes a lot of how we perceived education, even jobs as well. You know, one of my business partners was telling me that some companies had to buy like hundreds of laptops in a space of less than a week so that their workers can be able to work from home. You know, something that they would have never thought of doing before. And there's a lot of cost saving if you look at it from someone who has to get onto 2 taxis, right, to go to work, or 3 taxis, whatever the case. We see it happening all the time. To go and sit in an office and then earn 6,000 rand, 7,000 rand, whatever the case is. If it costs you 1,000 rand, why can't you just sit home and, you know, have an internet connection and you work from there? So all of a sudden, that now becomes a possibility.
But what does that look like, though, for majority of the population? Because obviously the ones that are connected to the internet or a stable connection, also a high-speed connection, really, that enables them to have Zoom meetings, enables them to connect to systems. What does that look like for most of the population that doesn't have those kind of systems in place? Or on the African continent and also in South Africa? Because, I mean, if you look at the rural areas, right, rural Limpopo, rural KZN, that child doesn't necessarily, I mean, it's two ways, right? Because if they have WhatsApp, their phone is probably good enough to have Skype.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, I guess it's, what I'm really asking is, there are still those remote areas where people don't have access and technology hasn't really reached those parts. You know, it's still very rural. The network is not the greatest, and that's why they may be sending their kids to Joburg to study.
Yeah. Look, from that point, just to go back to now answer your question before I jump onto this one. So we're looking at my future move that I would like us to do. Basically addresses that. So we're not stuck to one location, you know. So where we can be in multiple places with the partnership that we're working on. So to answer your question now, I mean, digital literacy has been one of the things that I've been passionate about for a very long time. It's something that I wanted to do. So I think that's the first point, that schools should have digital literacy or computer. Okay, the first issue, okay, I don't like talking about this, but I'm going to talk about it. Okay. The fact that you don't have a computer in a school for students to use, and there's no computer studies in a primary school to begin with, is the first problem in what we're doing as well, you know, because now we're talking about, we must teach kids how to code now and things like that, but you don't even have computers at the school for them to just learn Excel, to learn how to use a computer. This is start, this is the mouse, this is, you know, that kind of thing. So that's the first thing before we even jump onto the to the internet conversation. And then the internet conversation, one is about content delivery, you know. How are we going to make sure that kids who now can't go to school are able to get their homework, they're able to get their textbooks and stuff like that. But I think there was the initiative where they're doing with the tablets and things like that. But kids have either they have phones or their parents have phones. But now when you're talking to rural conversation, I don't know how that looks like. I only been visiting. I don't know how life looks like in the rurals. If the parents have, you know, the equipment and things like that, I think it's better, from my perspective, that we invest in the infrastructure to have those services delivered, and use the guys who are currently there. Use the big guys. Use your telcos, you know, your Vodacom and things like that. Have everything at a central location and have it zero rated. I think it's some of the conversations that they've been having. And then it's easier to deliver that instead of you having to go now and buy 1 million tablets that are going to be distributed to, you know, all the kids and things like that. It's a better thing to say, okay, what can we use? What do you have now that you can use to access the stuff? You know, for me, that's the easiest from my perspective. But I don't like having these big conversations because it gets a bit much, because obviously I've got my own perspective, you know, my little business that I've got here, and this is how I see things. Some other people obviously will see it from different angles altogether.
Yeah, but I guess that's the beauty of it all, right? We look at things from a different perspective, and if we bring if we have one conversation in, you know, one setting, we're able to hear different perspectives and then create solutions that
correct
a lot of problems, as opposed to everyone kind of shouting at each other. You know, it's better we come together and say, okay, well, these are the different perspectives. Let's find a solution that covers most of them. But just as a final question for me, what is the Africa or the South Africa that you want to live in? What does it look like?
The South Africa I want to live in is, you know, South Africa where opportunities are open to everybody. Opportunities in South Africa are there. But I feel like at some point there needs to be, we all need to be able to buy food and cover the basics, you know, and have proper shelter and have access to information, you know. Let me fail in life or let me not succeed to the level I wanted to in life because I didn't put in the effort. Let it not be because of my circumstances of where I grew up or I couldn't get to school, you know. I mean, it's a different conversation altogether to say I didn't go to the best schools or I went to a township school. It's a completely different argument altogether now to say a story to say I didn't actually go to school. I couldn't go to school, you know. So I think that's the kind of South Africa I want to live in, where everyone is open to opportunities. They're not reserved for the few, and where there is fairness, you know, where you can get work, you can get opportunities, you can get business opportunities, because you genuinely deserve it, because you're good at what you do, and not because you know somebody. You know, that's the kind of society I'd want to live in. I was watching a video yesterday which spoke to that. You know, it was basically highlighting the first world countries, what they have as opposed to the ones and what they don't have. They say a whole lot of stuff, but what I picked up is where there is less corruption. That's what they've said now in the video. The countries tend to prosper a bit more because people are accountable and people who are in very important positions are there because they really are good at what they do, and as a result, because of them being in the system, they're able to make decisions that are for the benefit of everybody, you know. And I think that's what we could also do in your personal space as well. Make a decision that not only benefits you, right, but you've sort of got your own little ecosystem under you or around you where people can actually also benefit and just learn, right? I mean, they're just people who just want to learn. They don't really want your money or anything, but like, how did you get to where you are? How can you help me at least better where I am now to in 2 years' time being at a way better position, you know, sort of a thing. So that's the kind of society that I'd want to live in.
Oh, thank you. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that I should have asked you?
What am I learning during the lockdown?
So what are you learning during the lockdown? Tell us. I know you're studying, so I'm sure you've been deep in your books.
I haven't touched my books. I've got 4 assignments due next week. Yeah, there's work to do, man. There's so much work I have. I've been doing virtual interviews for the past week or so. For some guys, we want to get for another business that I've got. So it's been really hectic. Imagine doing an interview over WhatsApp.
Yeah, that's
quite interesting.
One question that I want to ask you that actually you just triggered now. So currently, how many businesses do you run or are you part of?
No, man. So it's 4 businesses. 4 businesses.
The reason I ask this question is because what a lot of people tend to see, right? So they look at like the Bill Gates, the Warren Buffett, Steve Jobs, and they're like, well, you know, this guy's been running with one business from the beginning to now, and they obviously see that blow up. They're like, yeah, okay, he's done well. But what we actually don't know is that during that time, he might have been running 3 or 4 things concurrently, and the one happened to blow up. Like the perfect example would be Richard Branson, right?
Yeah.
Richard Branson had multiple things all at the same time, but Virgin seemed to be the one that takes off and did very well. That's the reason I asked the question, because I think a lot of people, you know, I mean, there's nothing wrong with being focused on one business, right? But what I find is a lot of entrepreneurs are involved in more than one business.
Yeah, it's for survival, first of all. And it could be to your detriment also. So what I've been learning, and I'll use this illustration now, what I've been learning over the lockdown period, I've been learning to gardening. It's so peaceful and it's so relaxing, like how to grow your own food and stuff like that. Oh, man. So it's been brilliant, right? And so I'd go to the garden that my sister started at home. I'd go in there like in the morning or in the afternoon, whenever I want to get away from the screen. And it's just so refreshing, you know, just to look at that and see how nature works and see the ecosystem that a presence of like plants creates, right? So imagine you're growing a particular vegetable, right? Let's say you're growing, I don't know, an onion or a carrot. Let's say carrot, right? But before it can, no, let's make it potatoes, because potatoes are good. Because I mean, you don't just get one potato, you get a lot. So let's say, yeah, they germinate. So let's say upon germination, right? You are hungry, and that's your only vegetable that you've planted, right? And like month 2, you're like, you know what? I'm hungry now. I'll just cut this thing and then it'll die, but at least I'll eat. So that's where we find ourselves as entrepreneurs, where you've got a business that's not sustaining you, so you need to find something else that can sustain you. But the great thing about it is that it's growing, underneath, it's growing really, really, really nicely. And if it's giving you like maybe 3 or 4 potatoes at the end of the day, you're like, you know what, I could eat these potatoes, or I could plant all 4 potatoes again, so I can get like 4 or 5 potatoes per potato, and then I'll have like 20, 25 potatoes, and then I'll take all of those potatoes again, and then I'll plant them again, and my garden just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And at some point, you're going to have to start eating, right? But you can't start eating when you've got 2 potatoes, because you're going to plant again, and you're going to get back to the same situation, and you're not going to have the growth. So it's good to have other plants that you plant, other vegetables that you're planting, so that you can concentrate on just growing the potatoes only, but on the side, you're eating other potatoes and other carrots, but this particular plant is just for growth. So that's some of the things that we have to do.
That's the greatest analogy I've heard about why one business.
You see, lockdown has been good for some of us. Some people it works better. I would prefer if I had one business I had to concentrate on, because when you focus on one business, there are leads that you get. Okay, there are things that you work on, but because you're full time on it, you're able to basically be on the ball for everything. When you've got multiple businesses, you need to concentrate on a lot of things, and some people might not take you seriously because you don't follow up. You're not on the ball all the time. So you might lose some opportunities. I know for a fact I've lost some opportunities because I didn't follow up, because I thought, at the time, that opportunity was not bigger than this one. So let me rather follow up this one. And this one never worked out. But that one could have worked out. It was small, but it could have ended up getting me more business in the long run. But you can't know that for sure. You have to think at the time, what's here and what can we do? So I would recommend anyone to start one business, but you can't eat it.
Yeah.
Good.
Perfect. Bongane, thanks a lot. I appreciate your time, man. And good luck with the rest of the lockdown. I hope you get to your assignment.
Yeah, no, thank you, man. All the best with you as well. Since this is you interviewing me, I can't even ask you any questions.
Yeah, we can ask you offline.
Okay, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure. I hope it benefits whoever listens to it. And
Thank you for listening. I hope the conversation inspired you to find African solutions to African problems. I am Gauteng Tlogbatla, aka African Investor, and you have just listened to one of Africa's critical thinkers.